We have to act. We can't wait and play games and nothing gets done. What surprises me more than anything else is that nothing's been done for all these years. Because I really see a lot of common ground, whether it's Democrat, Republican. I don't understand why this hasn't happened for the last 20 years. Nothing's happened. So we're going to get it done.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. That was President Trump Wednesday telling lawmakers that the time to act on guns is now. The president surprising members of Congress from both sides in a bipartisan White House meeting, voicing support for tougher background checks for gun buyers, greater power to seize guns from the mentally ill, and tighter age limits for buying rifles like the one used in the Valentine's Day shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida. The NRA's top lobbyists pushed back on some of those proposals Thursday night following a meeting with the president and vice president, tweeting, quote, "We all want safe schools, mental health reform, and to keep guns away from dangerous people. POTUS and VPOTUS support the Second Amendment, support strong due process, and don't want gun control." Joining the panel this week, Wall Street Journal columnist and deputy editor Dan Henninger, and columnist Kim Strassel, and Bill McGurn. So, Bill, is the president finally breaking what he calls the gridlock on gun control?
Well, it depends which President Trump you mean. The President Trump that sort of said we could do away with due process and do a lot of things.
Grab the guns first? Yeah.
Right. Or the president, after he met with the NRA lobbyists, that seemed to walk back some of his things. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about this debate is that the president is on
both sides.
Both sides. I was going to say the other side, but both sides. I think that what we saw after the meeting with the NRA is going to be closer to what he is. The Republicans can do some things, mental health restrictions and so forth, but I don't think it's going to morph into the full-blown gun control Democrats want. For one thing, I don't think Democrats want it. The ones in sensitive states, you know, folks like
in the Trump states.
In the Trump states, so the 10 Trump states that where Democratic senators, incumbents, are up for re-election, 4 of them, I think, voted against Dianne Feinstein's amendment in 2013 trying to ban assault weapons.
But Dan, I think what's interesting here is maybe the president is responding to what he senses is a shift in the political winds on gun control. That after a long time, maybe there is something that has to get done, if only because Republicans need to vote for something.
Well, that's right. I think the Republicans are under a lot of pressure, and whether he's breaking the gridlock or not, I mean, let's say no one would ever mistake Donald Trump with Lyndon Baines Johnson in terms of being a political animal. I mean, when the president sits there and says, we've got this, we've got that, why don't we just all get this done? You just cannot wave your hand and change the politics of an entire country. And Bill just described some of the political pressures that weigh in against merely transforming the gun control debate. So I think it's possible that, yeah, he's broken the gridlock, and I think that public pressure is breaking a lot of the gridlock, but that doesn't mean that the political realities around this issue in Congress won't reform once these bills get into the House and then try to get through the Senate. You're going to find the same problems.
Kim, I wondered what you think about this. You followed gun control for years, and I mean, sometimes we miss the shift, right? We miss the big political change. So we think about a subject one way for a long time, and I wonder, is this a moment where the NRA, as influential as it is overplaying its hand politically?
I'm not sure it's overplaying its hand, although I think it does. Look, it's done what it could do, is that it come out and it said that here are the things that we need to fix. And look, I have some respect for their position in that what they're focused on is, in fact, what we should be focused on. The question is, how do you keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people? Now, the tricky thing is that involves a discussion of mental health. It involves state laws like commitment. It involves due process. That's a place that not a lot of Republicans want to go. And so they've defaulted, led unfortunately by the president, back to a meandering discussion on gun control, which, you know, he started out all right talking about fixing the background check system. That is something that needs to be done. But raising age limits and an assault weapons ban, if that's what people want to call it, it's not going to go through the House, and it probably wouldn't even make it through the Senate.
Dan, what about that NRA point, though? Do you think that maybe that they need to bend more?
question is, I don't know whether they need to bend more, but I think they need to realize the pressures that are out there leaning against them right now. We're in a new era, and the big new
Social
element,
media.
Yeah, social media is the great new pressure out there, and that's what the students down there at the high school galvanized. The media itself responds to it, recreates it. It becomes this kind of exponentially greater power that leans on anybody in politics. And as we know, Paul, politicians respond to public pressure, and the pressure that's being brought to bear on the members of Congress right now is enormous. And I think the NRA would be wise if they saw a way to kind of give some ground. I'm talking purely in political terms, not talking about giving up the Second Amendment,
right?
But give some ground
Nobody's
to try to
talking
release
about
the pressure.
Yeah, Paul, I'd just say I've looked at the Twitter feeds of these students down there, the more active ones, and I think where this is likely to go, there's going to be a march on Washington. It's going to be an anti-Trump march. These people basically seem to just pick Democratic talking points. They're backed now by organizations helping them on the march, Planned Parenthood, MoveOn.org. They have a celebrity PR firm. I think it's quite likely that the other side overplays its hand, because a lot of the gun owners, and I'm not talking about just the NRA, I'm not a gun owner, but a lot of them feel that they're being called deplorables and that they're law-abiding people and they're going to be made to suffer for the actions of other people. I think it's equally likely that the left overplays its hand.
All right, thank you all. Iran, Russia, and now North Korea. A leaked UN report alleges that Pyongyang is the latest rogue regime aiding Syrian dictator Bashar Assad in Syria. Senator Lindsey Graham just returned from the region. He joins us next. A stunning new United Nations report was leaked this week, claiming that North Korea has been sending equipment to Damascus that could be used to make chemical weapons. The report documents at least 40 previously unreported shipments of chemical weapons components between 2012 and 2017, and says that North Korean missile technicians were seen working at Syrian chemical weapons facilities. The allegations, just the latest in a string of troubling developments as Syria's 7-year-old civil war threatens to engulf the region. Earlier, I spoke to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who just returned from a trip to the Israel-Syria border. You just got back from the Middle East. We want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk to you about the news, get your reaction to the news from the UN, that the UN has found that North Korea supplied material and experts for Syria to build chemical weapons plants, going back many years, but as recently as the last 2. What do you make of that?
Well, if the UN found it, it was pretty obvious. All kidding aside, the biggest concern about allowing North Korea more capability is that they share their capability or sell it. So the idea of allowing them to build an ICBM with a nuclear weapon on top to hit America is a non-starter, because they're likely to take that technology and share it or sell it. So that's why I think President Trump is right to deny them the capability to hit the homeland. This is just another example of how they share their technology with bad actors.
So there's no way, in your view, that we can contain North Korea, like Susan Rice and others say, because we can threaten massive retaliation. You're saying they'll just sell it.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest decision any president has to make. There's no place to kick the can now. We've run out of options pretty much in North Korea. Now it's time to tell them to stop. So the president's made a decision. I'm going to deny them the capability to hit the homeland with a nuclear weapon through an ICBM. And the main reason that we want to do that is if you allow them one hydrogen bomb, they'll get 50 over time, and they'll sell it or give it away, just like you see with this episode in Syria. So I don't think containment works. I think they're likely to sell anything they build, and that's a nightmare for the world at large.
Okay, now in Syria, you inspected the Israeli-Syrian border, and you can look down on that Damascus plain, as you know, and you can see what's going on there. How big a problem is this, the military buildup by Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon and Russia in Syria?
It's far worse than I thought it would be. On the Golan Heights on the Israeli side, you can see right in front of you a village in Syrian Democratic Forces' hands. You can see one village over in Assad's hands with Hezbollah flags flying. 20 miles down the road, there's an ISIL-held town of 80,000 people. So the Assad regime is moving all throughout Syria. the Syrian Democratic Forces are collapsing, and wherever Assad goes, Hezbollah goes with them, and that's a nightmare for Israel.
Well, and we had the skirmish there with recently with Iran sending a drone into Israel, or Israel retaliating. How regularly is Israel now bombing in Syria to stop that buildup?
Pretty regularly. The fear is that between Damascus and Beirut, there's going to be a corridor where weapons can pass. The big takeaway, Paul, was South Lebanon. The environment along the Syrian-Israeli border, the Golan Heights border, is turning bad for Israel at a pretty rapid pace. But southern Lebanon is a nightmare. It makes Gaza look stable. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, said that there are over 100,000 rockets and missiles in the hands of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And as you recall, Israel withdrew from southern Lebanon years ago. The United Nations was supposed to police the area. The United Nations Interim Force Lebanon has sat on the sidelines and watched Hezbollah dominate southern Lebanon with missile technology that now threatens every part of Israel. So it's a matter of time until Israel strikes southern Lebanon.
Well, it seems to me that though the Trump administration has said rhetorically they are going to oppose Iranian expansion in the Middle East.
Right.
They do not have a policy to do that in Syria. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes. General Votel, who's the CENTCOM commander in charge of Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, said this Tuesday. Make no mistake, while we continue to confront the scourge of terrorism, Iran's malign activities across the region pose a long-term threat to stability in this part of the world. And he said the following: countering Iran is not one of the coalition missions in Syria. So I see no strategy to deal with the Russian-Iranian connection that is dominating Syria. Syrian Democratic Forces are falling. Iran now is de facto control of Damascus, and that will throw the entire region into further chaos.
I assume you're going to deliver that message to the White House one of these days here coming up.
Yeah, I talked to General Mattis today about it. I'm writing an op-ed piece, hopefully in the Wall Street Journal, but I'm going to meet with General McMaster and tell him that 7 United States senators, 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans, believe that Israel is in a no-win situation. The United Nations has failed miserably to protect Israel's borders regarding Lebanon and southern Lebanon, and it's just a matter of time before Israel has to use military force. And the message is you need to come up with a policy not just to destroy ISIL, but to counter Iran. You know, Obama withdrew from Iraq. He took a pass on taking Assad on when he was weak. The vacuum was filled by Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and we have no plan to push back.
All right. One other quick subject. If the President of the United States fires his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is the Senate going to confirm a new Attorney General this year?
I don't know if I'd vote for anybody dumb enough to take the job. so here's the deal. Jeff Sessions doing a good job. This criticism against Jeff about appointing somebody to look at the DOJ, FBI problems with FISA is unwarranted because Jeff rightly recused himself. But I agree with the President in this regard. We need a special counsel to look at the FISA abuses here. They're real. I don't think the IG is capable of doing it. He's a good man, an honest man. Institutionally, he doesn't have the tools of a special counsel. But as far as Jeff Sessions goes, I think he's doing a good job. And I cannot imagine the turmoil that would be created to try to replace him in this environment.
All right. Thank you, Senator Graham. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Still ahead, President Trump says his administration will impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, spooking the financial markets and raising the specter of a trade war.
10% for steel, it'll be 10% for aluminum. And it'll be for a long period of time.
President Trump announcing Thursday that his administration will impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports next week, a controversial move that he framed along economic and national security lines. The announcement caps a fierce, months-long debate inside the administration, one that has divided some of the president's top advisors. The president defended his decision in a tweet Friday, calling trade wars good and easy to win. We're back with Dan Henninger, Bill McGurnan, Wall Street Journal, editorial page writer Jillian Melchior. So, Dan, this is the protectionist Trump who campaigned. This is the protectionist Trump we thought might appear. What's the economic and political damage?
Well, I'll tell you, Paul, I think this is really probably one of the most significant political events of the Trump presidency, and it may not end up well. Donald Trump is famous for making outrageous statements. Did it on the campaign trail. He's done it in Washington, whether he's legislating health care, immigration. And with that, you've got senators, members of the House, they all go, whatever, it's Donald Trump. He'll change his mind. It's conceivable that before the announcement's due next week, he will change his mind. Kind of like a prison warden saying, I'm going to withdraw rations, and then saying a day later, no, it's okay, guys. And it creates this chaos. This issue involves the entire international trading bloc of nations.
Right.
And I think the damage that's done here, no matter what he does next week, is that his credibility is going to be eroded in the future on any trade agreements that he tries to cut with anybody. I think in particular of the idea that we are going to have a bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom and Theresa May. I think it would be very difficult for her to get that through now.
Jillian, the immediate damage is in the financial markets. We saw them fall precipitously on Thursday. The companies that use steel, Ford, automakers, Ford, GM, falling 3 and 4%. Is that a warning to Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at it, there are 6.5 million Americans working in sectors where steel is an input. Only about 140,000 people who work directly in steel. So we're seeing the impact just ripple across industries. And I think another important thing to note with this is that it's likely to raise consumer costs. I mean, that 10% increased input for aluminum, that's going to drive up canned beer prices. These are commodities that people like.
And Trump voters, I mean, they do eat canned goods.
Right,
They do drink beer. I mean, and those costs are going up, Bill. The price of everything.
Everything. That's the problem. It's the law of the commons. You benefit a few at the expense of the many, and the reason you can do it politically is that the many are dispersed, whereas the beneficiaries are quite small, and you can target them, right?
But that politically, just think about that for a second, Bill. You can target them, but the damage is going to be fairly extensive.
But it points to I think the larger political problem with trade, which is that other countries do cheat and do give unfair subsidies, but no one's found a way to punish them effectively without hurting yourself more. I found a tape from Milton Friedman in 1978 when we were talking about the steel tariffs on the Japanese, and he explained all these things that economists know that you can't do it. And at the end, he said, if they're going to subsidize and give our consumers cheaper goods, and some of the consumers are producers like car manufacturers, he said, why should we reject this foreign aid?
But even if you worry about China, Jillian, because it doesn't play fair, steels are intellectual property. These steel tariffs don't really hit China very hard because China only supplies 2.2% of our imports.
Yeah.
Canada supplies 16%. So we're hitting our friends like China, Mexico, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil and South Korea.
You're absolutely right. And if you look at it, too, let's keep in mind that Canada brings in a significant amount of American steel. So that's one potential area for retaliation. I think this across-the-board approach, it really ends up hurting our allies and arguably benefiting our enemies.
And the retaliation, I know from watching what happened back in the Bush and Obama administrations, these countries can get really canny, Dan, about retaliating. They're going to challenge. I mean, they may go after Paul Ryan, Harley Davidson motorcycles, for example. They may go after Jim Beam in Kentucky for Mitch McConnell. Go after fruits and vegetables in Arizona to hurt the Republican Senate candidate there.
Who works for all the companies you just named? Trump voters. This is the politics of this that's hard to understand. The steel workers, sure, but all the steel fabricators, the auto industry, there are exponentially larger numbers of people working in those industries, blue-collar workers who undoubtedly voted for Trump. They're the ones who are going to get hurt, and they will be upset about this.
I guess Trump would say, if he were watching this, well, Bill, you know what? This is what I promised, and I'm fulfilling a promise.
Right. I'm not sure he needed to fulfill it this way. If you look, I think Donald Trump has a view of manufacturing America and these traditional jobs, a lot of their voters. But if you look at how he behaved on coal, which is taking off restrictions and letting the market determine whether there's a market for coal, and compared to this, where you're protecting some, it does.
You're slapping a tax.
You're putting a tax on people, and this tax is, as we've just said, it's being paid all across the economy.
All right, we're going to watch this closely. This is, as Dan says, a big deal. When we come back, President Trump taking aim this week at a familiar target. But is the latest attack on Attorney General Jeff Sessions the right way to get the answers he wants from the Justice Department and FBI?